The first Simpsons Halloween special occurred way back in Season 2, but it quickly became a tradition among the creators and fans. While we've covered the main Simpsons cast in one of our larger Good to Evil episodes, the Treehouse of Horror episodes stand alone as being universes of their own.
That's good.
All with their own twists and turns.
That's bad.
But with these new characteristics, how do our beloved Springfield residents stack up on the morality scale? I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is Treehouse of Horror, Good to Evil. Now, we'll be discussing and ranking the most frequent key players of the Halloween episodes, so we had to put some thought into how to tackle the Treehouse episodes, mainly because characters who recur are oftentimes presented with completely different personalities. For instance, a character can appear as a hero, only to appear in a later Treehouse episode as a villain. As usual, we'll be starting with the most pure and noble character and working our way down. These characters are the good. Bart Simpson is not usually seen as pure-hearted. It's not that he's horrible, but he's a kid that makes a ton of bad calls and tends to be impulsive. But in the Treehouse of Horror, he really shows the best of his character. It doesn't mean he's not impulsive or never makes any poor choices, but he is more considerate and heroic in these stories. He saves his classmates from a gremlin attacking the bus, he dives into a portal to save his father, and saves Lisa from a brain-sucking Mr. Burns. While he can be swayed to the dark side, he's typically teaming up with Lisa to stop some plot, such as escaping their murderous father or running from a cannibalistic school staff. Moving on, Lisa stayed pretty true to her character, even during the chaos of the Halloween specials. Especially in the earlier seasons, she was quick to catch on to any abnormal phenomenon, being the first to call out Mr. Burns being a vampire and trying to protect her family when she thought they were going to be eaten by aliens. She teamed with her brother, the dead only being raised so he can try bringing her beloved cat back and try to help stop the murders done by Willie. She also took the role of the Katniss parody, leading everyone put up to kill one another to take out Mr. Burns. Even though that last one didn't work out, it was done with good intentions.
Well, could be worse.
She was blamed by her imaginary friend for the murder she committed, saying she came from Lisa's mind, so everything she did was technically Lisa's fault.
I'm gonna kill everyone you love.
We don't really see it that way, since Lisa fought against her. But it's a warped thing to think about. Up next is our Bronze Medal of Good. Marge is usually higher on these lists, but she's had some questionable roles. While we rank her higher, as she is the one that is set up to warn parents about the violent programming to follow, she was also portrayed as a witch that devoured children, and as the head vampire rather than Mr. Burns. More often than not, she's the voice of reason in a realm of madness. She does have her more surprising moments, such as when she blew away a bunch of mutants rather than allow them to be chummy. Now the littlest Simpson. Maggie is usually turned into a variety of creatures during these stories, from being part alien, to being a witch, to being a demon more than a couple of times.
No one leaves alive.
But we cut Maggie some slack, despite her destructive tendencies, because we know she's just a baby, mimicking what she's seen on TV, or acting out based on something she can't really vocalize. But we also have to admit that a Maggie on the loose with unpredictable abilities is terrifying. Finally, we get to Homer Simpson. Homer is a beloved character, but the Halloween stories give him a chance to be more careless without any real consequences. In many of the stories, he's seen as a liability.
I don't forgive it.
Damn you!
There are times, such as after his wife is revealed as a witch, that he accuses Lisa of witchcraft, not wanting to be mocked for throwing a rock through his own window. He screws up the timeline numerous times with a toaster, sells his soul for a donut, who wouldn't, and turns into an axe-wielding maniac just from lack of beer and TV. But we have to give him some credit, since he does try to correct the timeline and fights for Maggie as his child when he learns about Kang. He was the one to take out Burns when Lisa revealed he was a vampire, and fought against the zombies rising up after Bart and Lisa's spell went haywire. Professor Frank is brought up more often in the Treehouse segments than he is in the canon episodes. His intellect is often sought in times of panic and unusual circumstances. One story in particular focuses on him bringing his father back to life, wanting the man that inspired him to pursue science to walk among the living again. He tried warning Homer against using the teleporter too carelessly, and was one of the ones consulted when Homer was lost in the void behind the bookshelf. With that said, we've arrived at the neutral territory. These characters fall in the gray area. Moving on to a fan favorite. Groundskeeper Willie often tries to be the hero, even though that never seems to go in his favor. He tried saving the children from being eaten by the school staff, tried saving the family from Homer's axe-wielding rampage, and showed up to try and get Homer back on his own timeline.
I can get you home, but you have to do exactly as I...
However, all those encounters ended up with him being taken out by an axe being plunged into his back in a twisted ongoing gag. He falls lower due to one of the most memorable Treehouse of Horror moments ever, with him being a Freddy Krueger parody, pretty much killing children as they slept. So, even though he does try to help most other times, this definitely weighs him down quite a bit. Plus, when he does try to help, he usually ends up with an axe in his back, but it's the thought that counts. Hey diddly ho there, neighborino! Ned Flanders was a tricky one to place. On the one hand, he's usually the same helpful and lovable Ned we're used to seeing. On the other hand, he's also capable of murder if need be, and is even shown to be the devil in one particular episode where he accepts Homer's plea to sell his soul for a donut. But even as the devil, he was still a reasonable and friendly guy, accepting going through with the trial when Lisa requested it. When Homer was exposed as already giving his soul to Marge, he still punished Homer in a way that would be torture for the man, turning his head into a giant donut. In Ned's other roles, he does lose points for ending up as a zombie, a flesh-hungry mutant, and as a witch-hunting radical. The times where Ned is still the nice guy, things don't work out well. When Ned was given the ability to see people's deaths, it just made Ned desperate to protect and ultimately cause more damage. When he tried helping the gremlin that was attacking Bart's bus, it wound up with him decapitated. We drop him a bit, mainly due to the whole devil thing. But we place Ned in gray because though he's done some questionable things, the poor guy ends up dead every time he tries to be the good guy. Chief Wiggum falls lower than he typically would. He manages to be just as negligent in these episodes as he does normally. But in one segment, he took it to the realm of murder. In what was meant to be a jab at Sherlock Holmes, he kills a bunch of innocent people just to be able to solve a case before anyone else can. He was also given the role as a sheriff in a small town, accusing women of witchcraft, having Marge shoved off a cliff, and led the entire police force to wait outside for Homer after the man's head was turned into a donut.
If you're innocent, you will fall to an honorable Christian death.
Normally, Moe has a hard time reeling in his anger and impulses, but when placed in circumstances where he can run wild, he gets even crazier. He was one of the mutants that became fixated on feasting on human skin and was portrayed as a demon that came to take Marge's favorite child, only letting up if Homer performed a task for him. Finally, we've reached the dark side. These characters are the bad and the evil. Kang and Kodos have changed a lot since their introduction. In the first Halloween special, they didn't do anything vile. Alright, so they abducted the Simpsons, but under the impression that the family would want to be celebrated on their home planet. They never make it clear why they wish to honor that family exactly, but they were quickly insulted when Lisa accused the aliens of wanting to eat them. Now, their following appearances were much different, mocking humanity for their weaknesses, attempting to enslave the Earth, and even running for president. Kang was even shown to be Maggie's real father, with Marge having been abducted and inseminated. Principal Skinner loses a lot of points for being the mastermind behind one of the most gruesome treehouse stories, the murder and cannibalism of children. Skinner is given some other questionable roles, but this one was by far the worst. He stooped to using the children as a means of dealing with the school's low budget and trying to provide better meals for not only the students but the faculty. The devouring of human meat wound up turning them all into deranged cannibals that were only concerned with getting their next victim cornered. Also, Skinner took an axe to Willie when the groundskeeper tried saving Bart, Lisa, and Milhouse. While Snake wasn't super popular, he was consistent enough to mention on this list. Being a hardened criminal, it isn't so unexpected to see him take out more than a few people. One story that stuck out, however, was when he was sentenced to death for a third strike and came back to take down the witnesses, Moe, Apu, and Bart. He was able to carry out his wishes beyond the grave, using the hair that was once his to control Homer, and his murders were gruesome and merciless, using a corkscrew to remove Moe's heart straight from his chest, drowning Apu in the squishy machine.
I know you are, but what am I?
And for Bart, sealing the boy up in his room and having him see his own father take a sledgehammer to him. And the fact that his hair tried to keep going after being removed was pretty disturbing, to say the least.
Now that's what I call a bad hair day.
Smithers earns the Silver Medal of Evil due to helping Mr. Burns. He collects dead bodies knowing full well they aren't entirely dead. He helps suck the brains from school children. He helps lure victims to be devoured by Burns' army of the undead. And the list goes on and on. Ultimately, his worst trait is that he goes along with whatever Mr. Burns cooks up, just wanting nothing more than to make the man happy. We were greeted with more than a few disturbing moments during these stories, such as seeing a snake version of Smithers unhinge his jaw to devour a now dead Mr. Burns so they could always be together. He's obsessive and loyal, but that was creepy for a number of reasons. Mr. Burns is just as sadistic in the Halloween universes as he is in the original storyline. He hunts people for sport. He preys on school children. He's a vampire that lures people to his home so he can feed on them. He steals Homer's body, even though the man isn't dead, to have a brain for his robot.
Bed cook. Bed cook.
He cuts off all cable and beer supply to his home, even though there was a trend of people going insane and murdering their families.
No beer make Homer something something.
He shares a body with Homer without any consent, figuring the man had plenty of room for both their heads, so why did it matter? He was a ruthless leader, hoarding the town's water supply and making them all kill one another to get any of it. He's already not an upstanding citizen, but he's made worse when it comes to the spookiest time of the year. Alright guys, it's your turn. What do you think? Who are the most evil characters in the Treehouse of Horror specials? Let us know in the comment section. Don't forget to hit that notification bell and check out our full Simpsons Good to Evil episode, where we break down the morality of all the residents of Springfield. But most importantly, stay wicked.